And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's program from the Old Schoolhouse series, which is a partnership between the 29 Palms Historical Society and the Desert Institute, which began 17 years ago. Tonight's program is one of 10 monthly lectures and discussions that we hold on the second Fridays of the month. And before we officially begin, I just want us all to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the indigenous peoples who have stewarded the lands that we are on for time immemorial. And I want to start by acknowledging the people of Joshua Tree, the Mojave, Cahuilla, Serrano, and Chemehuevi peoples. And I'm also going to acknowledge the people of Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I'm tuning in from, who are the Jicarilla Apache and the Pueblo people. I want to thank the Desert Institute for making this programming available to all. The next thing that I want to say is just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to ask everyone to feel welcome to use the chat, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're tuning in from, and any comments that come up during the presentation. We love seeing those, and we highly encourage conversations on the chat. We just ask you to be nice about it. And any questions that you have will be answered at the end of the presentation to avoid confusion with some possible streaming delays. So make sure that you use the little ask a question button on the screen, and that way we'll be able to get to your questions in order at the end of the presentation. If you experience an issue, just click on the help button that's at the top of the chat. And if the issues persist, I would say drop a comment on the chat so that other people can see that you're experiencing that and maybe they're experiencing the same. And if we see enough people having tech issues, we will then interrupt momentarily the presentation, and we'll make sure that we can get that fixed. A lot of the times, a simple refresh of your browser will help you get the streaming quality up and able to listen and watch. Replay of this event will be available to everyone who signed up, so you don't need to do anything. It's going to be the same link that you used to watch today. So if you have to leave early for any reason, or if you lose the stream because you run out of Wi-Fi, you will be able to watch the replay. I think that's it on my end. So I am very excited to be here tonight with Pam Tripp, who is going to tell us about the National Park Service and how it's been inspiring a nation to protect our lands. And I will hand it over to you, Pam. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Pam Tripp. I am a park ranger with the National Park Service. I started my career as a volunteer at Joshua Tree National Park, and around 2004, I got hired on an emergency hire in uniform. And from there, that's where my career started within the Park Service. And so I was at Joshua Tree until 2016, when I left the park and came here to Casa Grande Ruins National Monument. And during my time, and I love history, and I have a degree in history. And so when I read this book that I'm going to be talking about, it really got me excited about the history of the Park Service itself. And so last year, I was able to take that excitement and turn it into a program. And so I'm happy to share that. The first picture that you see up is a picture I just took tonight. This was the sunset at Casa Grande Ruins National Monument tonight, as I was walking around a little bit, trying to calm my nerves a bit.
Pam, I'm going to interrupt. I think we need to start doing the screen share.
Oh, got it.
I don't think we're seeing the photo yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No worries. Let's see.
Oh, here
so
we go.
if you just want to click on that on your end on your screen, you should have that little button that says share screen. There you go.
Is that right now?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. new program for me to be working in. Okay, so I'll start again. This picture that you're seeing was taken tonight, sunset at Casa Grande Ruins National Monument. I was taking a walk around, just trying to calm my nerves a little bit, and it's always very exciting to be at work at night. I don't get to do that very often here. I'm usually working, just during the day. So we enjoy the sunsets here in Arizona and here at our park. But tonight's program is about the National Park Service and the inspiration, inspiring a nation to protect America's lands. Let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. Oh, here we go. All right. So the inspiration for this program and the inspiration for talking about the creation of the National Park Service actually came from this book, Creating the National Park Service, The Missing Years. The book was written by Horace Albright and Marion Albright Schrenk, his daughter. He was one of the directors of the Park Service, one of the ones that helped create the National Park Service to begin with. The book to the left is the same book, it is just a different cover, and that was the original book I actually read. And so if you wanted to look for the book, you'd want the bigger version that you see on the picture. That's what's being sold now. But I read it a few years ago, and I was very inspired to learn about Horace Albright and Stephen Mather, and just to talk about those years that they struggled to create the Park Service. And so I like to start by talking about the park I work at a little bit. Casa Grande Ruins itself was protected as the first prehistoric and cultural site by the U.S. in 1892, which of course is many years before the Park Service was created. And there were many parks that were protected, national parks and national monuments. You can probably guess some of the big ones like Yellowstone or Yosemite. So here's a list of those early national parks and monuments that were in existence long before there was park rangers and the National Park Service system itself. We have Yellowstone, Sequoia, Yosemite, Mount Rainier, Glacier, Rocky Mountain, Haleakala, Hawaii volcanoes, and Lassen. The ones in green, Crater Lake, Wind Cave, Mesa Verde, Montezuma's Castle, and Tonto were, I believe they were monuments, all monuments at the time. But these were under protection. Long before the Park Service, there were people that wanted to protect the public lands or wanted to protect lands for people to visit and enjoy, so that they could enjoy the nature, and also a way to just protect the lands from building up of towns and people moving into the areas. So you need inspiration if you're going to do that, and there was a lot of people out there that inspired. I'm going to talk about a couple of them, but there's a lot of people that inspired a protection, a National Park Service, and the protection of the public lands. A couple of them, Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir. This is a picture of them, I believe, at Yosemite. And so definitely they played both of them played a big part in the protection of public lands and the protection, and yet opening up these lands for people to see. They did their own traveling, had their own ideas of what protection meant, but they played an instrumental part in creating the national parks and monuments. There was also, in the United States Forest Service, we had Gifford Pinchot. And so he was another inspiration, kind of a different agency, but still the same ideas of protecting these areas. But there was a turning point. And one of the turning points that happened that really got things going was a place called Hetch Hetchy. This was located in Yosemite. There's a valley called Hetch Hetchy. And between 1908 and 1913, Congress was debating whether or not they wanted to create a water resource. And San Francisco needed water, so they decided that they wanted to fill up an area of Yosemite with water to create that resource. It created it was a big controversy. There were people against it, there were people for it. Gifford Pinchot was actually for it. whereas other people were fighting against it. As you can see in the bottom picture, there's the before picture at the top. At the bottom picture is what it looked like once it was decided that they were going to create a reservoir. And so, again, a lot of angry people that were not happy with it being filled with water. They felt it definitely, you know, took away from the beauty of this beautiful valley that you see in the top picture. And it's probably still, an area that would maybe have some, you know, people might have some bitterness about that got just, in a sense, destroyed because of that. This quote came from the National Parks America's Best Idea on PBS. But the fact that Hetch Hetchy and that decision was made, it was a battle cry that would inform all wilderness, wildland, parkland battles from that moment on. It looks like a defeat, and yet what's interesting about it is that in that defeat, a whole series of people began to wonder whether the parks needed more protection than they currently had. That there needed to be some greater rampart, some greater wall that could defend the parks against future such controversy. So the part that I take out of that quote that really stands for this program and this book that was written is the people began to wonder whether the parks needed more protection than they currently had. And so there were people that started working to get that protection. And you had the Forest Service, you had other land management, but then people started to work to create a park service. Now, once the protections, once they wanted to protect more of these parks and monuments, that's when the military came in, because at that point there were no park rangers. So this picture is the Company F of the 6th Cavalry of the U.S. Army, and they protected national parks before the formation of the National Park Service. And so I believe this picture is probably, this might be Sequoia Kings Canyon, or it might be Yosemite. I'm not sure where this picture was taken. So this is where Horace Albright and Stephen Mather come into the picture. Horace Albright was a lawyer. He went to the University of California, Berkeley in 1912, graduated from there, went to Georgetown Law School, graduated in 1914, but he started working for the Department of the Interior in May of 1913. So the fight, or the desire to start creating the National Park Service began around 1914. The picture that you see right now is Franklin K. Lane. He was the Secretary of the Interior. And this is Stephen T. Mather, and him and Horace Albright would become partners for many years to come. Stephen Mather went to the University of California. He was a millionaire, he had lots of money, ran a borax business, he was a member of the Sierra Club, and he loved national parks. And he wrote a letter to Franklin K. Lane stating the importance of having a protection on national parks and monuments. And he was very, very passionate about it. So when Franklin K. Lane wrote back to him, now it's said that we don't know for sure this was his answer back to Stephen Mather, but this is the story that's told at least, is that he wrote back to Steve and said, if you don't like the way the national parks are run, why don't you come down to Washington and run them yourself? And Stephen Mather took him up on that. Stephen said, all right, I'm going to do it. So that's where the partnership of Mather and Albright began. They traveled together, worked together. Albright being a lawyer, Stephen Mather being a millionaire with money, and also some connections with people. They were able to work well together, even though they didn't always agree on things, but they were able to work well together. Now, how are they going to do it? How are they going to create a National Park Service? So going back to this picture real quick, one of the things that was figured out during the time they worked together was that Stephen Mather loved the national parks. He was a big proponent of Yosemite, of Yellowstone, and the other big parks, and mostly in the West. He loved the ones in the West, whereas Horace Albright was a big fan of monuments. And he wanted to make sure monuments, those smaller areas like Casa Grande Ruins and other monuments, wanted to make sure they got protected. But how are they going to do this? How are they going to create an agency that could work to protect these areas? Well, Stephen Mather loved the West. As I mentioned, he loved the Western parks, and he traveled a lot to the West. He went all over the place. And sometimes he was just going places to kind of, you know, hang out with some of his best friends or some of the people that he knew, some of his acquaintances, and get to know them, talk to them, and start trying to inspire them to give support for the endeavor that he was getting ready to take on. You can see, you know, horseback riding picture on the right of where it says the West, that's Yellowstone. And then I believe that might be Yosemite where he's standing. Mather, on the other hand, Albright, on the other hand, he's traveled himself. He also went places and visited, but he spent a lot of time in Washington. He spent a lot of his time in Washington, D.C., in his office, working on, you know, doing stuff that a lawyer would need to do to promote this idea. But also, he kind of stayed back and took care of things when Stephen Mather would travel, which he did a lot. He really enjoyed the travel, while Albright stayed back and kind of did a lot of that the footwork that needed to be done. And as I said, he also was a big proponent of making sure that monuments also got protected. So he would have to remind Mather every once in a while that, hey, don't forget the little monuments, even though Mather would kind of be like, oh, I'm not worried about those yet. Well, one way that they were going to be able to promote a National Park Service was with publicity. And so lots of different types of publicity. Up in the corner there, you can see the National Parks portfolio. And I have a copy of it that I purchased recently. And this one was from 1928. And inside the book, it had pictures of national parks, of monuments throughout the United States, areas that were protected already, and they would give a little snippet. They would talk about each of those areas. Casa Grande Ruins, National Monument, there's a little paragraph in there in the book about it as well. And these books would be created, and then they would be sent out to different people. So it was a published book that would then be mailed to all the different people or agencies or offices, places where they thought someone could be influential and supportive. And it would be a way of saying, look at these fantastic public lands that we have. And look at what we put in this book, and so you can see what there is available. There was a smaller version of that too, Glimpses of Our National Parks. That was another way of, another booklet that would get sent out as well. And then it got reprinted a few times over the years, and probably as parks got added into the area. You also had newspaper articles, such as the one here that has Stephen Mather in it. The national parks are playgrounds for people. That's the plan anyways, that was the plan. And so there was numerous articles that would be written about a park service, a agency that would help protect. And so one of those things, and you can see that in that article, is a road system that was created, and that was going to be the National Parks Highway. But also you had National Geographic magazine that would publicize things about national parks. You also had railroads and different events that would get published, and so there would be flyers and expositions and different things that would try to entice people in, and would encourage the support of national parks and the protection of them. So lots of publicity was necessary. There were also mountain parties, and they got called the Mather Mountain Parties. And these pictures taken by Gilbert Grosvenor, he was one of the ones in the picture there, or he was taking that one, but he was on a lot of these mountain parties. Stephen Mather, again, loved to travel, so he would put together these huge parties of men that were going to go on horseback, take the trails through Yosemite, through Sequoia, through Rocky Mountain National Park. And so they also had, they had a cook with them. They had Tai Singh, he was the cook, and he would create, as you can see in this one picture down here, he would set the table, tablecloths, you know, they had some of the best, you know, dishes and silverware, and they had a proper meal every day. They hiked to the top of Mount Whitney, and of course there had to be photographs, lots of photographs, because you had to share the beauty of the area and also just show who was going on these mountain parties. An example of one of the camping areas that they had set up. Imagine waking up there on one of these trips and just seeing the beauty around you. And it would have been a very exciting time for many people, including Mather, of course, because he would get to share this beauty with businessmen, with artists, with photographers, with lots of different people who might have a system or a way of supporting the Park Service. He, of course, also a lot of times paid for this himself because there was no budget for this kind of thing, but he would use a lot of his own money to pay for these trips. Art. Art was definitely another way that people were able to get the word out about these beautiful national parks and these beautiful lands that were out here. And Thomas Moran was one of them. In the Hayden Geological Survey of 1871, he started doing some painting. This is the Little Grand Canyon, I believe, in Yellowstone, and this is also Yellowstone in that area. And so he painted beautiful pictures, and those pictures a lot of times would end up back in Washington or to areas where, you know, they could display, you know, have galleries displaying art. Another artist was William H. Holmes, also went on some of those surveys, and he did a lot of drawings and pictures that way. He also had William Henry Jackson, who was a photographer, and so he took a lot of pictures. And again, all of these things put together could be put into a book. They could be sent to a gallery where people, it might draw people in to see these pictures, and it would hopefully make people want to go out and visit these areas. And so the main purpose of what Mather was doing was to draw people out to the West, to draw people to the national parks that did exist, or even to lands that they wanted to protect in the future. Here's a few other photographs, Yosemite, I believe Crater Lake. So just an example of some of the other pictures that were taken long ago. I personally would not want to be standing on that rock where she's standing, but it's probably was and still is a good photo spot. So here's a picture of just some guests that gathered in the lobby of a hotel at Glacier, and they had come. So the railroad was also going to areas and would bring people out to the areas where there are national parks. And so, and this hotel itself was built in 1915. And this is just an example, again, of photography, taking a picture of large groups that would gather, and these are the people that you would want to help support those national parks. There were also roads. Roads were very important in the national parks. And so if you wanted people to visit them, they needed a way to get through. And at first, the roads weren't very good. They were, you know, if it got muddy, they were horrible to travel through. You could get stuck in the mud. You could actually get stuck inside the park and not be able to get out for days because of, you know, whether it be snow or whether it be rain. So one of the big things that Mather insisted on was improving the roads. And these are examples of some of those: Tioga Pass, Walnut Road, and you also had the National Park to Park Highway. And so that highway took you through many of the protected areas, many of the parks that existed. I want to read just a little bit about, because one of the things I talk about being a park ranger, one of the things I've always mentioned is the balancing act that takes place, knowing what to do and what not to do to protect areas. And so this is from a foreword by Robert Utley. He actually wrote the foreword for the book, Creating the National Park Service. So, in the years since World War II, America's national parks and monuments have suffered a variety of crushing impacts. Millions of people and millions of automobiles demanding ever-expanding road networks, proliferating campgrounds, lodges, and hotels. Rampant development, crowding against park boundaries, air, noise, and water pollution, and a host of destructive special uses severely damage the very qualities that gave the park's national distinction. At the same time, shrinking appropriations and new scientific insights into the vulnerability of delicate ecosystems severely impaired the ability of the National Park Service to cope with the challenges, and as commanded by the Organic Act of 1916, preserve the parks unimpaired for the future fault the Mather Albright administration for laying the groundwork for some of these afflictions. Mather and Albright organized a massive publicity campaign to lure people to the national parks, championing automobiles, roads, luxury hotels, and other amenities of comfortable travel. They adopted measures to afford visitors maximum opportunity to view and even interact with wild animals. Albright himself lived to see their knowledge of the natural world outgrown by scientific research. Such criticism not only unfairly disparages the reputations of two great men, but egregiously distorts history. It judges Mather and Albright by the conditions, knowledge, and experience of today. It ignores the social, political, and economic realities of the early 20th century. Mather and Albright knew that Congress would not create any new parks or fund existing parks unless people visited them. Without publicity, roads, comfort, accommodations, and relaxed enjoyment at the destination, people weren't going to travel to the national parks. And so if people didn't travel to the national parks, there wasn't going to be that support and there wasn't going to be any funds given.
Hi,
So,
Pam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that we're experiencing some sound issues.
Okay.
So we are hearing like a lot of crackling, so it sounds like maybe there's something touching your mic or anything that could have changed from the time you started the presentation to now.
Other than maybe the paper in front of my mouth or something. Maybe that's what's I was reading off of. So that might have had something to do. Can you hear me better now?
Not yet. Let me see. Let me try muting you and putting you back on. And yeah, I had to log in a different device because my the computer wouldn't let me unmute myself. So let me mute you and bring you back in. Hopefully that will work. Let's try again.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, I can still hear it. Are you using your computer mic or is there a separate mic?
I do have the AirPods I can switch to.
Let's try
that the whole time.
Yes, thank you everyone for your patience.
I don't know if it's connected. Is it connected? Can you hear me now? All right, hold on. Is that any better?
No, I don't think the AirPods mic is connected yet because it sounds exactly the same as before.
Is there a thing in hear you right now? No. Is there a way to access for audio settings? Switch over to the AirPods. I should do that for you.
If not, let me try to do this. I will just reboot you. So I will kick you off and then I'll invite you back on. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay, see you soon. Let me see if I can find. Okay. Again, thank you everyone for your patience. I'm just inviting Pam back.
Is that better? Can you guys hear me now?
That is way better.
Okay. I don't know if it's through the AirPod or just, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Everyone can hear me now? Okay, good.
Yes.
Sorry, so where was I when this started?
I think you
always go
were
back.
about 3 slides before.
I don't know if it was when I was reading when it started to crackle, so.
I can't remember the exact theme just because I was trying to troubleshoot my mic not working either to talk to you.
Okay.
But
I'll just go back a little bit.
maybe let's pull up your slides and we'll identify those photos easily. Yeah, the slide with the
I think it was
postcards
this.
on the
Okay. All right. Right there?
Can
right.
you share your screen? We just need you to click on that
Oh,
screen button.
Oh, yeah, that too.
No worries. I know we have to do it all again because we
Oh, no problem.
kick you off and inviting you back on.
There we go. There.
Thank you, everyone.
Now? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
So I was talking a little bit about the road, and there was the National Park to Park Highway. And actually, I'll go back to, I was reading something earlier, but I'll actually continue with what I'm doing here. So you had the roads so that people could get through there, get through the parks and see them. Well, you also had people needed a place to stay, and they expected nice accommodations. They didn't want, they didn't want to be just coming in and having to sleep on the ground, although there was some camping, as you can see in that one picture. Some people did like to camp, but there were expectations of good accommodations. And so this is an example of some of the hotels. You had the Mammoth Hotel at Yellowstone. You had the Crater Lake Lodge at Crater Lake. And you had the Sperry Chalet, which was at Glacier National Park. But there were also plenty of places that people would camp. Now, you might be seeing a theme here, and I was reading something here, a theme where you had to draw people in to the national parks in order for them to support the national parks. So they needed roads, they needed hotels, they needed entertainment, and we'll show more of that and keep going. There's more camping. Camp Curry at Yosemite National Park was one of the Curry was one of the concessionaires. And so they created this camp where people could stay. There was also, in the early days, there was bear feeding. And so this was the lunch counter for the bears. And this was in Yellowstone, and this was a big thing. It drew a lot of people in. This would have been part of that entertainment that the visitors would have wanted. And so they would feed the bears and have them, people were able to get a little bit closer to them and see them in action. And this took place for many years. The bear feedings took place. Now, you might be thinking along this way, the roads, the hotels, the bear feeding and wildlife, all the entertainment. We would not necessarily do that today. But one of the things, in order to get support for the national parks, is you had to draw visitors in. And to draw visitors in, you needed to provide them comforts and accommodations and places they could get food, places that they could see wildlife or some kind of entertainment. And so that kind of got looked down upon in later years and would even today maybe get looked down upon. But Stephen Mather and Horace Albright wouldn't have been able to gather the support, because without that support, they wouldn't be able to get any funds to keep the national parks going. So all this stuff, it works in the end, but it was definitely one of those, we wouldn't do that today. So along with the bear feeding, here's a picture of Horace Albright at the top. He's sitting at a table with the bears. When reading about this, he was a little nervous sitting next to them and wanted them to take the picture very quickly. Here you have Stephen Mather in the bottom picture talking, playing with the bears as well. And so people were getting lots of entertainment out of that as well. Now the bear feedings ended they ended soon after Horace Albright left in 1929, many years later. is when the bear feedings ended in Yellowstone, and he had left to become the director of the Park Service. And so slowly but surely, everything, the bear feeding started to kind of die off, and he didn't do that anymore. But another entertainment was from Camp Curry. You could see the Firefall, and that was where they would light a fire at the top of the falls in Yosemite, and then they would push the coals over in that area, push the coals over, and so that was big entertainment for people. That too ended a few years later. I believe it was actually Stephen Mather who ordered them to stop doing it, and so they stopped doing the firefalls. But you also had other concessionaires. Of course, today we still have Fred Harvey Trading Company. You see them at different national parks. Here in Arizona, Grand Canyon especially, they had lunch counters, souvenirs that people could buy, lots of souvenirs. And there was a uniform that the females had to wear, or the people that worked there had to wear. And so it is still something that we see today, but it was a really big deal to have those concessionaires because they provided those services that visitors wanted and needed. Now, there were also, everything was, not everything was easygoing as well. There were Native Americans at times that weren't happy with the way things were, and understandably. And so this is a picture of them, some meeting with Stephen Mather. And in this case, they were here to protest the use of the names, of different names at Glacier National Park. Because most of the names that were being used to name areas were named after the white men. And so a lot of the Native Americans were not happy with that, and they wanted a chance to talk to the director at the time. So the other thing that took place during all this, there were the travel to different areas. There was, seeing all the parks. There was traveling all over the Mather Mountain parties, all the different things that had to be done. While in the Washington, D.C., a lot of times Albright was back there trying to push along a bill. That would help create what is now the National Park Service. And so after many revisions, he had to change things and have people look at it and change things again. After many revisions, on August 15, 1916, the Senate passed the bill. Well, a few days later, on August 22nd, the House passed the bill. And then after that, with it being printed, and then it was ready to go to the president. And that was President Woodrow Wilson at the time. Okay. So while Horace was back in Washington, the bill had passed through the Senate and the House, and he was thrilled. He was excited, and he wanted to get that bill pushed through really quickly. So Horace was at the Department of the Interior on August 25th, and he suddenly had this really awesome idea in his head. His wife was visiting, was working with him in the office, and he said, "Stay here, I'll be right back." He ran all the way to the Capitol from the Department of the Interior, and ran to the Capitol, and he went there to talk to the enrolling clerk. And he was able to convince the clerk to put the bill in the same envelope as the Army appropriation bill. While he was there, the clerk received a phone call, and it was somebody saying, "Hey, get that Army appropriation bill to us because the president wants to sign it." And when Horace overheard that, he actually said, "Hey, can you slip this in? Please put this in the envelope." And so the clerk agreed, and the clerk left to go take it to the White House. And so Horace left very quickly. He took transport to the White House, and the clerk hadn't arrived yet, but he talked to the legislative clerk while he was there. And he convinced him to get the president to sign the bill at the same time as he was signing the Army Appropriations Bill. While he was there, he also requested that when the pen used to sign the bill, when it was done being used, that it be saved so that he could present it to Stephen Mather. So then Horace went home to wait for the phone to ring. He lived about 4 stories up in an apartment building, and he was just kind of laying around waiting for the phone to ring. And that was when didn't have cell phones, so he had to run downstairs to the phone. And the phone rang about 3 different times, and every time he ran down, it was somebody else. It was somebody asking if he was going to attend a birthday party or this event or that event. And finally, on the 4th ring, he went down and he got the phone call that President Woodrow Wilson had signed the Organic Act of 1960 at 9 p.m. on August 25th, 1960. He was very excited about that, and he couldn't wait to tell Stephen Mather. So he sent a telegram. Well, first he found out that he had saved the pen, so he was able to get that pen. And he, Secretary to the President, wrote, "Knowing your interest in the National Park Service, I take pleasure in sending you herewith the pen with which the President today approved H.R. 15522, an act to establish a National Park Service." Horace then turned around and said, "Park Service bill signed 9 o'clock last night. Have pen President used in signing for you." And he was able to give that to Stephen Mather because he knew Stephen would be very excited about that. Now, the Organic Act has many more words than what you see on the screen now. But the main words, the ones that park rangers use most of the time, and we remember the most, are to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and the wildlife therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. This part sticks with us. A lot of times when we hear it, it's not uncommon for us to get goosebumps when we hear this part of the Organic Act, because we wouldn't be here without it. Now, the book ends off with this, basically. It goes on for a couple more years within the book, but the book basically ends when the Park Service was created. Horace Albright eventually moved on to become the superintendent at Yellowstone, while Stephen Mather was the first director of the Park Service. In later years, Horace Albright became the director of the Park Service. Now, in honor of Stephen Mather and Horace Albright, many things have been named after them. 2 of the main things I think of are places, training areas that I know that myself and other rangers have gone to. One is the Horace Albright Training Center at Grand Canyon National Park. You also have Albright Pink in Grand Teton, Albright Visitor Center at Yellowstone, Albright Grove at Great Smoky, and Albright Worth Grant Program. Stephen Mather, the Stephen T. Mather Training Center is in Harpers Ferry, Virginia. I haven't had the chance to go there yet, but that is another place a lot of people go for training. You have Mather Point at Grand Canyon, Mather Memorial Parkway in Washington, Mount Mather in Denali, Mather Pass, Kings Canyon, Mather District, and Camp Mather in Yosemite, and Mather Overlook at Great Basin. So, and there's probably more. I just wasn't able to find a whole list of them. Another thing that helps commemorate the creation of the Park Service, but also the work that Stephen T. Mather did, is these plaques. On the plaque, it reads, "He laid the foundation of the National Park Service, defining and establishing the policies under which its areas shall be developed and conserved, unimpaired for future generations. There will never come an end to the good that he has done." The pictures that you see here, the one on the top is at Casa Grande Ruins, right outside our visitor center. And the one on the bottom there, that's at Joshua Tree National Park. That was installed actually, or dedicated August 25th, 1916. And that was actually my last day working at Joshua Tree before I moved here. So now there are many, I can't remember exact number, but there are many of these plaques at many different national parks. So the one part of that Organic Act that definitely strikes a chord for all of us is that the work we do is for the enjoyment of future generations. That little girl that you see in the picture there is me. I was 4 years old, and I was visiting Casa Grande Ruins. Little did I know that many years later, I would end up here, actually working here, also enjoyment of future generations, enjoying this view from my office. And so I get to walk outside my office and see the Casa Grande Ruins every day. And I vaguely remember visiting back when I was 4 years old, but it's good to know that I was able to come back here and be a part of the staff here. and to help protect this area for as long as possible. And so, thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I know it covered just a few years, but happy to answer questions if you have them. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, and I really appreciate the history and the background. I don't see any questions on the Ask a Question section, so I encourage everyone who's here with us, if you have any comments or questions, now is the time before we wrap up. I have a question to begin just for you, Pam, and it was, how did you become interested in history and specifically in the national park history?
Well, I don't remember exact age, but from the time I was a little girl, when we would visit national parks in different areas, especially Civil War battlefields, I know that that's one of the things that really grabbed my attention. I always enjoyed history. I was also a big Moran Wilder fan, so I love Little House on the Prairie, and I know I love the history of that as well. But I can remember one defining moment, and I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and I had just gotten out, and I was in Virginia visiting my brother, and I went to the Petersburg battlefield. And while there was a ranger, he was an interpreter ranger, and he was in period costume. And I remember looking at him, and this would have been in 1991. I remember looking at him and saying, I want to do that someday. And at the time, I was thinking I wanted to be in a period costume doing that. That changed a little bit over time. I just knew I wanted to be an interpretive ranger. I think I even asked him, like, what job do you have? And I knew I wanted to be an interpreter for Muir. And so I took that with me, didn't really do much about it. My husband was stationed in the Marine Corps too. We were stationed on the East Coast, and I think I applied for one position at a park, but I didn't even know what I was doing while I was applying. So again, at that point, I was a stay-at-home mom too, so I wasn't really a big push. But it was 15 years later, basically, after I'd seen that park ranger, when we were stationed in 29 Palms, California, and it hit me that I was, it hit me at some point that I was going to be right next to a national park, and I hadn't even thought of it. And I was like, oh, maybe I could volunteer. So that's how I started working at Joshua Tree, by volunteering. I would go in and help at the front desk, and I just basically told them I was never going to leave. And so they were stuck with me for a while. But that love of history, I was able to carry that love of history has always been there. And so when I finally when I did go to college, I got a degree in history. And I've always loved doing tours of historic places, and Key Ranch being one of my favorites to do. But the love of history was there for a long time. And 1991 was when it really culminated in me wanting to be a part of it.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a question from Lorraine. She's asking if there were any women involved in those early years other than our hero, Minerva Hoyt. I guess that's for Joshua Tree specifically. But
to be honest, in this book, there was not a lot of women listed. Now, Horace Albright's wife was big. She played a large role in helping him make bills and helping him with the paperwork and stuff that he did as a lawyer. She traveled with him through. Mather was really good at inviting him and his wife, like, come on out, you need to have your honeymoon. And then he would put them to work. And so they were spending the whole time with Mather. But unfortunately, that's one thing I noticed in this book is, and his daughter helped him write the book and stuff, but there are few women listed in the book that are talked about, but they did play a role, because they definitely, they were ones that would voice support for a National Park Service. Just not any big names that were, or not names that stood out, or that we talked about a lot in the book, so.
Right. What year was the book published?
This book was published copy. Well, let's see. Hmm, 1999. I think it's copyright. Well, this, yeah, copyrighted in 1999. So about, yeah, 20 years ago.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Someone else, Nicole in the audience is asking, well, this is like a personal information question, so I don't think we should address it, but they're asking for your email, which I don't know, I think maybe can you be reached somehow through the parks staff directory or something like that, or is that information not public?
Oh, no, I can give my park email address.
Okay.
It's Pam _Tripp, TRIPP, at NPS as in National Park Service .gov, NPS.gov.
Great. And I just dropped that in the chat for anyone who is interested in reaching out to Pam with any follow-up questions.
Please feel free to, if you have questions. I definitely recommend this book too. It's one of my favorite books.
Great. So I had a question.
I enjoyed reading it the second time. Yes.
Oh, great. Their next question is, what was your favorite place when you volunteered at Joshua Tree?
Well, that's a good question. I'm very much a logistical, organizational operations person. Ask anyone I work with. I like to organize things. Probably even Kevin would be able to agree with that.
Attest to that.
Yeah, attest to that. So one of my favorite places was actually at the front desk. And as I got more comfortable with that and was working with the staff, I really enjoyed being part of the operations and being part of even the decision making once it got to a point that I could be. But my favorite place to go in the park was Keys Ranch. I enjoyed the hikes at Joshua Tree. I enjoy all parts, but Keys Ranch holds a place in my heart. I talk way too much about it here at work. And people are like, oh, she's talking about Keys Ranch again. Because that's where I first started doing interpretation, was doing the tours at Keys Ranch, and I really enjoyed that. So being in the visitor center and being a part of the operations and doing tours at Keys Ranch, those would be two of my favorite places.
Nice. Sue asks if that you mentioned national parks highways. What exactly are those?
I'm not sure like what they would be nowadays, like what the names of them would be. And I think it was just called the National Park Highway at the time. So I'm sure that there's probably a name or a number for that highway now, and I just don't know, or it might be a few that are connected. But they were definitely built to try to connect the parks. I'm just not sure what the name was. Or what it would be called today.
And then Paul is asking, where is the pen today?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I had trouble finding that one picture that I did have. And I would imagine maybe it's in the Department of the Interior building somewhere in a display. But that's a good question. I'm going to actually, if you want to email me that, I can look into it and see if I can find it out, because I would love to know where it's at too.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the wealth of knowledge that you shared with us tonight, Pam. I don't see any more questions, so thank you again, everyone else who was able to join us live, or if you're watching the replay. We really appreciate your support. And on behalf of the Joshua Tree National Park Association's Desert Institute and the 29 Palms Historical Society, I just want to thank you dearly for that support and encourage you to continue to support us in other ways, like sharing our posts on social media and making sure that you're tuning into our newsletters. We are, as you know, here every second Friday of the month. So we hope to see you again. And if you have any questions, you feel free to reach out to us on the joshuatree.org website. And I'm going to drop some important links on the chat just so that you know where to watch replays and things like that.
You will definitely have access to this replay and this very same link, like I mentioned before. So here are all the messages. So, you can sign up for future events and donate and all sorts of ways that you can continue to support us. Thank you so much again, Pam. Thank you, everyone who was here. I'm Gabache, lead volunteer with the Desert Institute, and I will see you here next month. Ciao.
Thank you.